Good evening, everybody. My name is Martin. I'm president of the Marshall Society. And on behalf of the Marshall Society and the Cambridge University Real Estate Finance Investment Society, I'd like to welcome all of you to tonight's event. We have a fantastic panel of speakers today to discuss whether real estate is a driver of inequality and market volatility. Just to say a few words about the Cambridge University Real Estate Finance and Investment Society, I have Sven here with me, who will then also be introducing our chair of the night, and then handing over to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us also on behalf of CUREFIS. As Martin mentioned, I'm Svenja. I'm the community of CUREFIS, the Real Estate and Investment Society at Cambridge. I noticed that there are at least a few of you who are not members of the society yet, so in case you're interested in real estate, I think this is the case when you're here, please approach us afterwards. We are more than happy to put you on our mailing list because we are planning some interesting events in the next term as well, and in particular the next year, I think. I'm really looking forward to the debate today. And I'm really happy that we're going to debate with the Marshall Society workout. And I would like to hand over to Dr. Eva Steiner, who is lecturer of the Department of Land Economy here in Cambridge and fellow of this nice college, St. John's.
Thanks very much. Welcome everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. And thank you for the kind introduction. First of all, before I start introducing the speaker is one of the more competitive members of our panel, has instructed me to take a poll in terms of what do you actually think about this notion. So if we think about this, the theme of our debate as notion, real estate is a driver of inequality and market volatility, who of you thinks that's true? So that'd be roughly... It is not a driver of inequality and market volatility. That's 13. 13. Okay, so I think our
how many don't know?
Oh, how many are saying? How many don't know? 1, 2. Okay, 3. Thanks very much. Okay, so that's the score before the debate, and then we'll see if maybe some of you change your minds after the contributions from our very illustrious panel tonight. So please let me introduce the speakers in the order of their contributions. First, I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Bob Colnett, who is a senior lecturer at the Collaborative Center for the Built Environment at the University of Northampton. Dr. Colnett has a career in community planning in London, on the South Bank and in the Docklands, and later he has worked for the London Borough of Harrogate as a regeneration manager. He was head of sustainable development at the Northamptonshire City Council, and he's also a member of the Planning Network UK. And throughout his career, he has written widely on UK urban policy for academic journals, professional magazines, and newspapers. His contribution will be followed by Robert Pito, who is joining us as the chairman of DTZ Investment Management, the specialist investment and fund management arm of the global real estate consultancy DTZ, which currently has over £7 billion worth of assets under management. Mr. Peter is also a non-executive director with Landlease Europe, and he's on the boards of a number of cooperative funds, including GCP Student Living, which is the first UK student housing REIT. He was also the global president of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, and he used to be the chairman of DTZ UK from 1998 to 2008. Our next contributor, our next panelist is Professor Michelle Baddeley, who is joining us tonight from UCL, where she is a professor in economics and finance of the built environment, based at the Barton School of Construction and Project Management. Prior to this appointment, she was Director of Studies in Economics at our very own Donald Keys College, and she was also a faculty research fellow at the Faculty of Economics, and the Deputy Director of the Cambridge Centre for Economic and Public Policy. Amongst others, Professor Bellamy's research explores a range of applied economic issues, including housing market instability and the development of behavioral macroeconomic models. And then last but not least, the final panelist for this evening is our very own Professor Colin Zeri, who is of course the Rhodes Professor of Real Estate Finance here at the Department of Land Economy, and Colin joins us with over 30 years of experience as a researcher, consultant and academic in the property markets. And Colin has provided expert advice for the EU, the Norwegian government, the Bank of England, the Asian Treasury, and a wide range of public and private sector clients, and he has appeared as an expert witness in the upper chamber of the Lands Tribunal and the Australian Federal Courts. Most recently, Colin has been appointed as the chair of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on the Future of Real Estate and Urbanization. So as you can see, we have an excellent panel of speakers for you tonight. And first of all, I would like to ask you to join me in welcoming Dr. Bob Poland.
Thank you very much. It seems like I already have the majority on my side. But let's see if we can convince some of the waivers. I want to begin with some facts. The top 5% of the global wealth distribution has captured 44% of the increase in the world's income since the late 1990s. The Knight Frank Wealth Report 2015, what's this thing? Which is a survey of the ultra-high net worth individuals, who are people with 30 million US dollars net worth. That survey showed that 80% want to invest their money in property rather than other investments. London is now called the second Russian capital. Danny Dorning, in his 2014 book, Inequality in the 1%, says that the top 10% in the UK are almost 500 times richer than the bottom 10%. And the top 1% own 99% of all UK property wealth. Kevin Cahill, in his book, Who Owns Britain, argues that land and property ownership in the UK is class and income based. 189,000 families own 2/3 of the UK's 60 million acres. These facts are not remote curiosities or just symptoms of the current property boom. Real estate is the foundation of our highly unequal class system, and it systematically reinforces this inequality. How does it do it? Firstly, the real estate market maintains gross disparity of ownership between social classes and between generations. For example, the cost of home ownership for many is prohibitive. It's 15 times average incomes in London, 15 times in Oxford, and 15 times in Cambridge. Even in Liverpool, the average house price is 7 times the average income. Land value and unearned increases in land value over time are not taxed and are overwhelmingly captured by the wealthy and those who own their own homes. The planning system is market-led, supporting market interpretations of the best use of land and protecting the interests of better-off neighbours. There's no better example than the development of London Docklands over the last 20 years, where luxury development and the banking towers of Canary Wharf stand alongside poor housing and run-down public spaces on the Isle of Dogs. There is no better example here than the lie of trickle-down. The landowner and development lobby is immensely influential. There is a huge bias in favour of developers and house builders. A cartel that engages in widespread land banking, holding land off the market through optioning building land, and inflating prices by drip-feeding property into the market. The latest bias is called viability assessment, an extraordinary get-out clause for developers from planning obligations. For example, the Haygate estate in Southwark, where 1,100 homes were knocked down, all social homes. Lendlease, a giant Australian-based developer, signed a deal with the London Borough of Southwark to buy the estate and build 2,500 homes. London Borough of Southwark policy was that 35% of the new homes should be affordable. But Lend-Lease, amazingly, argued that with 35% affordable, the scheme was not viable. They were only prepared to build 25% quote-unquote affordable, which, by the way, makes a minimum of 6% return. And only 76 socially rented homes out of their whole development, in spite of the roaring London property market and many of their own apartments marketed overseas, off-plan for well over £1 million. And they claimed commercial confidentiality when community protesters asked to see the details of their viability assessment, arguing that Lend-Lease had put forward a deliberately pessimistic viability assessment. Government house building policy discriminates against those who cannot afford to buy. Affordable housing as a percentage of new build was 50% in the 1970s. It's now down to 10%. Government subsidy goes disproportionately to landlords rather than those in most need. The annual bill for housing benefit is astonishingly £24 billion of tax money. This goes into the pockets of landlords, while the subsidy to build affordable housing is just £1 billion a year, with the consequence that landlords' income and wealth has increased astronomically. Last but not least, policies such as the bedroom tax and caps on housing benefit discriminate against the poor. There is no bedroom tax or cap on property value inflation pocketed by the rich. Conclusion: the public interest and justice in housing are being degraded by these biases, scandals and secret deals in real estate. This is what this motion is all about. I'm not going to talk much about volatility because Michel will do that. But our economy rests heavily on property. The so-called economic revival and the so-called long-term plan is largely a property bubble. It goes without saying that booms and slumps are caused by and exacerbated by property booms and slumps. There is an alternative. Go to Coin Street on the South Bank, where 13 acres have been built out by a local community trust, leading to the development of cooperative housing on social rents in the middle of London, public open space and affordable workshops. Go to Letchworth Garden City and see how they captured land value for the community instead of being signed off by landowners. Read about how local communities part one the Freedom of Information Viability Tribunal behaviour in spite of Lend-Lease's tactics, and won outright at the Freedom of Information Tribunal for the Greenwich Peninsula. Read the Shelter, KPMG and Lyons review of housing supply, which shows how the volume house builders market has failed. It's failed to deliver sufficient homes and affordability. These reports spell out the need to increase affordable housing for councils to build more and to control private sector rents. Study the land reform legislation in Scotland that gives community trusts the first option to buy public land or private estates that come onto the market. There is more. The new era of estate in East London that tenants resisted the sell of and finally was bought by a community trust. These are the seeds of an alternative to real estate as a driver of inequality and volatility. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'm now going to address the motion. The motion is that real estate is a driver of inequality and market volatility. This is, I don't deny, and I'm not going to argue with any of the points that Bob has made. It's a political attitude that he's adopted, and I want to deal with macroeconomic drivers, and I want to deal with the microeconomic ones, some of which is touched. To me, there is no doubt that whilst real estate is a factor of production, it is also, sadly in a way, a store of wealth. And that's where the confusion here is. Is real estate on its own and its existence a driver for inequality? So let's just look at this from a different perspective. If you look at the Forbes Billionaires Club, the 2015 version of this, there are 1,826 billionaires that have been registered by Forbes. 268 of those this year are newcomers. But of the total, how many do you think have had their rise to wealth created by real estate? Any guesses? Any guess? Well, let me give you this. 10%. That is all it is. If you look at the newcomers, 268 newcomers to it, so where's this wealth coming from in the new generation? It's true that 12%, slightly more, come from real estate, but the majority of those, 80%, come from China and India, the new development areas, where real estate development and infrastructure has been the driver of change. Interestingly, not one in the top 20 of those new entrants has anything to do with real estate. And if you take the youngest set, of which there are 46 under 40, there are only 2 with a real estate tag. Both of them have inherited it. In the UK, the Sunday Times Rich List, which has not been published, just about to be, Philip Beresford, I know well, who does it, tells me that a slightly higher figure, 17% of the Sunday Times Rich List, have a real estate background. But only 11% of those made their money from the management, from actually activities in creating wealth and buying into real estate. The rest are inherited. And that's not surprising when you consider the longevity of our history. So let's look at the reasons for the inequality which Rob has so eloquently put forward. I'm going to argue, and I believe it, that the changes in real estate, in inequality, and in particular the inequality in income, isn't driven by real estate. Not in this day and age. It's driven by macroeconomic factors. It's driven by globalization. It's driven by technology. And it's driven by the communication revolution. And we go back to the late 19th century in order to establish an equivalence of what happened. When we finally got ships that traveled the world by steam, all of them. We had refrigeration. We had mass production. The United Kingdom's the first industrial nation in the world. And we had good agriculture, and we were slaughtered. Standard of living fell in the last part of the 19th century. Why? Because we opened up, and there was a globalization, a technological revolution, enhanced by a communication revolution called the telegraph. So we're in a new game now. This is what's happening. Always people create wealth. If you look at the States, for example, the main steel magnates, the railroad people, my great-great-grandfather who built 20% of the railways in this country, and then went bust, sadly. Otherwise I wouldn't be lecturing to you here. All of these people were playing in a domestic environment. Now, you play in a global environment. And so if you get something right, you make it globally. So you don't just make 10 million, 50 million. You make 1 billion, 3 billion. The globalization and the success of ideas drives this creation of wealth. What does it mean for us in the United Kingdom? The economists and I did do 1 year of economists here, but the economists in here, well, you know automatically that if you open your markets up internationally, You have to compete internationally. And manufacturing goes to the place of the cheapest production. Where did it go? And it was absolutely clear to anybody who sat and thought about it at the beginning of this revolution that was taking place, that the standard of living in this country, at best, would stay static. Because we have to compete in that environment. And it has. And it's not gone very further forward. By the way, I just haven't mentioned real estate in this at all, have I? It's got nothing to do with this inequality. We're in a low-wage environment because we are competing internationally, which means we can't afford, many of us, to buy houses and compete. All those points are correct. So let's take that as one aspect. Let's just drive down into cyclicality or volatility. Clearly, real estate is the culprit for this as well. But this is absolute nonsense. It's a vehicle, not a driver. We have been so badly served by central bankers, regulators, politicians. Let me just give you a few absolute horrors. Alan Greenspan, who famously said that bubbles will take care of themselves. They certainly did. Let's think of the Glass-Steagall Act, which allowed banks to amalgamate and for the investment banks and the trading floors to use your and my deposits as an asset base for speculation. Big mistake. Let's think of the Americanization of the way we do business. The separation of origination and distribution. So nobody had the responsibility for making a loan and seeing it through to the end. Like a good old-fashioned British bank manager. History. Let's think of the deprofessionalisation of our society. Nobody values professionals who give independent advice. This led to massive leverage and, against real estate, a vehicle for that, not a driver of it. If, as a central banker famously said, it was the central banker, I can't remember his name now, Chesney Martin, said after the Second World War, brilliant Fed chairman in the States, it is the duty of the central banker to take the punch bowl away just as the party's getting started. Did Greenspan do that? No. Did the British financial regulatory environment? No. Lord Turner has admitted, as chairman of the FCA, the FSA, that his team were asleep on a job. They were more concerned about whether I was a person who should be validly allowed to give financial advice than looking at macro-financial prudential issues. So, just to finish up on that, real estate is a difficult place to work in because its supply responses are slow. So development never happens and then like London buses, three of them come along just when the cycle ends. Now, you'll ask yourself why that's the case. And the answer isn't, is in the sense where Bob's coming from. It's in the planning system. I agree with everything he said about the construction industry, the house construction industry, which is down to 10 or 8 major constructions, land banking. But to tap them is not the point. The point is that we need to build 300,000 or 400,000 houses a year to even start thinking about the backlog, just to kick it home. Why aren't we doing that? That is not property's problem. That's not real estate problem. That is a system in which most of your parents have played a negative part in this called NIMBYism. It is very difficult, and I'm chairman of Boltonsborough Village Neighbourhood Plan, to get developments in a village that's needed to support the school. It's very difficult in order to find places that you can build. And the government, not just this one, but the previous one in particular, have not helped because the one thing we need is more social housing. And the one person who can deliver it is the housing associations and local councils funded largely by private sector, but also by government. These are things that we can do to alleviate the housing problem. They are not, they are the cause of this inequality that we have. But the real estate itself, for all the reasons I've said, is not the driver. It's really a feeling.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about equality, bringing it down to earth a little bit more, in that, as you will probably realise, it's an arbitrary boundary. We're talking about the top 1%, top 10%, top 30%, top 3%. And so I'm going to talk more about a person such as myself. So when I began my academic career in Cambridge, I bought a house in Bible Street for £100,000. And in terms of equality of opportunity, if you want to, very, very broad literature on equality, and if you want to get into some definitions, in terms of equality of opportunity, I was very lucky. Because two key sources of household wealth, housing and pensions. People of your generation, unless you're lucky enough to come from a rich background, are going to struggle to afford housing loan. And so the new inequality is coming not from the class system, not from the division between the aristocrats and the workers, it's coming along these demographic divides. So a recent, in Daily Telegraph, a recent article saying that in the early 60s, the average age at which people bought their homes was 24. In the 2000s, it was 28. Now it's well over 30. And so this is a form of wealth inequality. The younger generation are no longer able to afford housing wealth in the way that I could afford it when I was young. Another key issue to take into account is regional inequality. And so if you look at some statistics on affordability of housing, so someone wants to accumulate housing wealth. If they live in London, they're going to struggle. If they live in the north, they're not going to struggle quite so much. A key way of assessing housing affordability is to look at disposable income as a proportion of house prices, or to look at the multiple. How many multiples of your income do you need to be able, if you're on the average income, do you need to have to buy a house? So back in 1985, the multiple in the north was 3, the multiple in London was 4.5. So already a regional inequality there. 2.5 times more expensive on those grounds in London than it was in the north. But if you looked at 2015, the regional inequalities are considerably more stark, because in 2015, it's 7.5 times multiple of average income to buy a house in London, and still only 3 in the north. And so the ability for those people to accumulate housing wealth in the north is considerably more constrained. And just in terms of what's happened over time, considerably more constrained. So I would find it difficult that someone could argue with those things. Another issue to take into account when it comes to wealth inequality that is arising from possession of housing wealth is a problem of path dependency. So those people particularly who, say, live in London, and I own London property now, so I regard myself as being a lucky group, benefit from government investments in infrastructure. So they capture the externalities from that. So there's evidence from, and across the world, Shanghai property if you're close to the Shanghai metro, Cardiff bus stops, London schools. If you happen to be lucky enough to be close to those infrastructure resources that public finances are paying for, then you're going to increase your housing wealth even more by not spending a penny of your own money. And so in terms of those demographic and regional divides, if you're thinking about the equality of opportunity, your opportunity to accumulate housing wealth, there's a lot of differences there. And it's not about the top 1%. I personally don't care if someone's earning millions of pounds a year, because I don't know what I would do with £1 million a year. I care more about, the proportion of people in certain regions or in certain demographic groups that are excluded or limited in their opportunities to accumulate. So that's the wealth inequality point, or the volatility point. And so there's been a lot of financial innovation since the 70s, 80s, of course. Hand in hand with globalization, computerization, all those sorts of things going on. Following the when Margaret Thatcher came into government from the 1980s onwards, there was the Big Bang in which mortgage lending was very much affected by that. And so people could, prior to that, people were borrowing money, mortgages, from, say, building societies, and the funds in those building societies were money from savers. And so the money was circulating between this quite stable, narrow group. As soon as you get financial deregulation, a whole load of other mortgage lenders pile into the mortgage lending market. At the height of the pre-2007 housing boom, and there's loads and loads of examples of housing booms and busts. You can look in absolutely reputable economic journals. There's a paper by Mulbauer and Murphy back in the late 90s that showed quite clearly that there are housing booms and busts contributing to this volatility. At the height of the last boom before 2007, mortgage lending in the UK, you could get 110% mortgage. Your bank would say to you, yeah, sure, you can borrow all the money you need for your house, you don't need a deposit, and by the way, here's £10,000 to buy yourself some furniture as well. And that is unstable mortgage lending, leading to financial volatility as a consequence. And this was a global phenomenon as well. And if you want to think about it in terms of financial theory, so those of you who've done a financial theory will know that the definition of speculation is a deviation from the fundamental value of an asset. And so if you think of the fundamental value of a housing asset as the stream of discounted imputed rents from that housing that you're getting, it's quite clear that if you look at the charts that there's a lot of volatility around those trends. But in addition to that, you could say, well, housing is by its nature illiquid, and speculation is very much about highly liquid, very fast-moving markets. And so you've got a house, that's there. Transaction costs, particularly in the UK, and it's very slow it's very tricky to sell a house. But that's when the derivative markets come. So there's a very wide and complex range of causes for the financial crisis, and how David's book, Financial Crisis, Who is to Blame, is a great account of all the different things that were going on. So housing market certainly is not the single cause. But in terms of the subprime crisis, the securitization of those mortgage-backed assets, you're no longer selling an illiquid asset with significant transaction costs. You're selling these mortgage-backed securities that are derived from that underlying asset, and there's no reason at all why you can't buy and sell those extremely quickly. And so overall, for all these reasons, I think the evidence very much backs up the idea that that real estate is a driver of inequality and volatility. And the key question for government now is to think of policies to moderate that, and particularly for, say, your generation, to figure out ways in which you can get access to housing wealth, if that's what you want to do. Or if your decision is that you do not want to accumulate housing wealth, and want to accumulate pensions instead, or maybe that's just, that's just not what you're into. The other part of this, which has been touched on already, is the declining public sector investment in housing. But that's almost an obligation, because it's not strictly related to the market. So thank you.
Been very foreseen. I think that's all. I think personally, I'd like to really thank the organisers for inviting me to the event. I really appreciate both societies' invitation, and St John for hosting the event. I also want to say it's really good to share a platform with Bob Palmer. The real estate people here, if you haven't read Ambrose and Palmer's The Property Machine, I hope it's still in print somewhere. And you really should. I mean, for me personally, it was quite an inspirational book, and it certainly shaped the way that my research went, even if I'm arguing a different conclusion. We don't have formal rebuttals, so I'm not going to deal individually with the points that have been made before. I think that's fair. Just a couple of brief comments. One is sort of a historical perspective. So it's easy to say something like, well, inequality is being promoted by real estate law. Just a quick reminder that in 1919, 90% of UK households rented. And even after the financial crisis and the retreat, 60% of UK households own. So somehow there's been a democratisation of ownership along the way. And if we think about it in the development economics context, we think of sort of the Soto argument for the importance of real estate as a springboard for growth and development. I think it's easy to forget. The other historical perspective is this idea that only real estate is accumulating wealth. So, if you look back to house price growth in the United Kingdom, apologies for an international audience talking about the United Kingdom, but house price growth was around about 9% nominal 1975 to the end of last year. That's substantially less than the growth in equity prices over that same period. So actually, if you weren't investing in your house, you could have been investing in houses. So if the regional inequality argument is inescapably strong, well, hang on a moment, supposing you're spending less of your income on your house in the peripheral regions, which means that wage for wage, you've got more disposable income, which you could be investing in other assets. So I don't think it is an inexorable argument. But to avoid confusion, I think it's very important here to distinguish between commercial and industrial real estate and residential real estate, whether rented or owned. Residential is more emotive, and it's interesting that both our speakers talked about residential to the exclusion of talking about commercial and industrial real estate, even though most professional investment portfolios are actually dominated by commercial investment real estate, not residential. Although many institutional investors would very much like to be involved in housing provision. We, out of Cambridge, did a project recently where we were asking housing associations what they would need in terms of mechanisms and vehicles to take on board institutional investment in social housing and intermediate housing. And their response was, actually, we can get as much capital as we can use. Our problem is a capacity constraint. The point that Robert made about the fact that it's not that the real estate industry doesn't want to deliver houses. There are just very strong constraints on them doing that. And the other point here is that outside the United States, the global financial crisis, the problems of debt secured on real estate were much more prominent in commercial rather than residential markets. So I'd urge you to break away from the real estate equals equation that really understands, which really hampers our understanding of these markets. And even in residential markets, it's easy to overstate the implications. So, for example, in the United Kingdom, at the peak of the crisis, less than 2% of mortgages were actually in arrears, and possession rates, annual possession rates, were well below 0.5%. Now, for the individual households involved, that's a really serious incident. But it's not quite as major a dislocation as perhaps we might think. So, I wanted to talk about investment. I want to talk about why do investors hold investment commercial real estate in their portfolios. And the answer is clear and simple and defeats the motion. Why do investors hold real estate in their portfolios? Because it diversifies away risk. For a multi-asset investor, and that's for most professional investors, low correlations and favourable cash flow characteristics when compared to financial assets produce superior risk-adjusted returns and better match their liabilities. So property reduces volatility. It doesn't drive volatility, it reduces it. We don't need to dwell on that. It's well documented in multiple research publications. It's evidenced by the major public investors extending their portfolios. As many of you are aware, I was involved with the decision of the Norwegian Global Pension Fund to include real estate in its asset base. We produced in that report substantial evidence of the benefits of so doing. I'll come back to Norway in a moment. It's also not true that those diversification benefits disappear in crises. Again, work that we did here shows quite clearly that even across the global financial crisis, having real estate in your portfolio protected you against volatility. Yes, real estate is bad, but the timing is different. So, if real estate doesn't drive volatility for investors, how does that affect inequality? Is the fact that we're getting these higher risk-adjusted returns, just the rich getting richer through better risk-adjusted returns and their ability to gain exposure? Well, only if you have a very one-dimensional individual view of who those investors are and ignore the complexity and the nuance behind that. Let's go back to Norway. Why does the Norwegian Global Pension Fund exist? It exists to protect Norway from the depletion of their natural resource base. It exists to protect Norway from volatility in commodities markets. It exists to protect Norwegian government spending on healthcare, on the care of the elderly, on social service payments, including support for their immigrant communities. So there is a significant global investment working to reduce or counteract inequality and using real estate to improve their ability to do that. Changing minds. Now, in the property machine, Bob Goldman and Peter Ambrose talked about the institutional investors, the pension funds and the insurance companies, and the way that their efforts privileged commercial real estate. Well, pension funds, as an example, are one of the most important investors in real estate. One of the huge changes in society has been the provision of occupational pensions to reduce poverty and inequality in aging populations. This isn't pensions for the rich. This is pensions for nurses, teachers, shop workers, bus drivers, car workers. Michelle's pension, probably Bob's pension, are underpinned by real estate investment. TIA CUREFIS, voted as one of the world's most ethical companies, is the 5th largest global real estate investor. And it provides pension plans for academics, researchers, medical and cultural fields with 5 million members. That's not the 1% owning real estate. That is 5 million people owning real estate and having risks of inequality, risks of poverty in their old age, assuaged by that real estate investment. NEST, the UK National Pension Scheme, is aimed at workers in smaller organisations not covered by pension arrangements. And that will have a 20% investment in real estate. So it's reducing inequality. It's not increasing inequality, it's reducing it. Or take insurance, another institutional investment field, allowing those with limited resources to deal with catastrophic events at personal, individual, community, regional, national, global level. And otherwise would have devastating effects on those with marginal resources. And how do insurance companies pay the claims? They invest their insurance premiums in mixed asset portfolios with real estate as the bedrock. Any scientists, any medics out there? Any of your research funded by the Wellcome Trust or similar trusts? Disease and ill health are major causes of inequality in the world. And where do those trusts get their funds to invest in research that cure major diseases, that identify causes and find solutions to health issues? Well, they draw down income capital from their endowment funds, often heavily invested in real estate. Wellcome owns £2 billion worth of real estate, returns from which fund vital medical research. So real estate isn't driving inequality, it's stopping inequality. Now it's easy to find other examples. My point was a simple one. Investors are not a single entity, but many entities who use their portfolios for good, to generate economic development, to deal with sources of inequality. Of course, you can portray the property investor as an evil capitalist landlord with a pinstripe suit and red braces, evicting the grandmother from her house. It's a convenient stereotype, but it's not the reality. I've got tons more stuff. I think they're on for hours, but I'm sure we're out of time. Okay, let me do 2 quick final things. First of all, how much less length? Real estate plays a critical role as a factor of production, a place to do business, a place to build, to make things, to provide goods and services, and shelter if it's residential. It's best served by property that's fit for purpose, property located, well managed, property that's resilient to change in technology, that's sensitive to environmental change. Who is best to supply and manage that? Individual firms, individual households? Where's the sense in that? Firms should specialise in things for which they've got skills. Is a software house best placed to be a property developer? Is a medical equipment manufacturer the optimal landlord? No, it's much better to have real estate specialists who can gain from economies of scale and use their skill sets to provide the appropriate property for innovation and creativity. It's a base for that activity. And in turn, real estate employs many people and makes substantial contributions to the national economic output. And then finally, the point about cycles and crises. Real estate's cyclical. It's not alone in that, it's a function of the supply lags relative to demand signals and organic theoretic explanations of that. What matters is the wider impact of those cycles. And what the research really shows is that whether a significant adverse consequences and mutation effects, they're generally caused not by a real estate cycle on its own, but the interaction of a real estate and credit cycle. And the work on real estate bubbles and crashes for the World Economic Forum looks at the many case studies of asset bursts, bubbles and bursts. And they all have unique aspects, but have many common features. And those common features are not real estate features. The common features are above all leverage, the amount of capital that's flowing around the world seeking a home that ends up in real estate, policy shifts, macroeconomic policy shifts that increase the upside and that precipitate the downside, failures of macroprudential regulation, the lax regulation of financial services, the distorted housing finance system in the US. That's not a real estate problem, that's a macro regulation problem. And macroeconomic shocks that precipitate turbulence, which are shocks. There is an elephant in the room here, which is the land, and we could have a whole extra debate on that. But ultimately, the real estate is there. It's a factor of production. It's usable space for society and economy. So in summary, in the hunt for victims, it's easy to blame real estate for crashes and for driving inequality. That'd be simplistic and inaccurate. It's easy to work with stereotypes and archetypes of evil capitalist property developers, avaricious landlords, but that'd be a crude misrepresentation of a more complex, nuanced reality. Don't blame the symptom. Look for the cause. Inequality is driven by distortions of the reward structure and the institutional structure of society, not real estate. And in the end, real estate sits there as a source of stability in investment portfolios, and it sits there as a venue for economic activity and creativity. The premise of this notion is completely misguided. You should reject it precisely. Thank you.
I would like to perhaps take the opportunity to start off some questions before, and then of course giving you the opportunity to ask any questions of our panelists that may have come to your mind as you are listening. So my first question is for Mona, our first contributor, and I was very intrigued by your notion of the responsibility of the planning system in your observations of inequality in the housing market, which was then, of course, also picked up by Peter. So I would like to ask you to comment on that a little bit more.
Well, the planning system, when it when it was first created in this country after the Second World War, was attempting to, I think, to be quite fair, to redistribute the benefits of land and establish the best use of land for the general public as a whole. And it's kind of a careful balance between public and private, between private landowners and government and so on. And over the years that's become increasingly distorted, so that the market and its language of what is the best use for land is now dominates the agenda. And highlighted, as I said, by this notion of viability. It's almost like saying that the best use of land is what makes it most commercially viable, which cannot be right in a planning system. It can't be just to make the planning system just be about what is commercially viable. It must be about need, and it must be about the public interest. And that's the way in which the planning system's got increasingly distorted. And the idea that the NIMBYs are responsible for the shortage of house building is just factually incorrect. The house building industry is responsible for the shortage of housing. They hold vast amounts of land, which my own research will be mapping, and they own options on all the building land in the South East. They simply don't intend to build it out, because if they built it out, it would mean there'd be a reduction in prices. And their job is to keep up prices. Their job is not to build houses, but to release houses onto the market at a particular price that enables those companies to establish a certain level of profit. So it's the house builders and the landowners that actually are preventing house building taking place in this country. It's got very little to do with land. I'm not saying planning is irrelevant, but to blame it on planning or influence is just to completely distort the truth and to hide the market factors that lie underlying.
Thanks very much for the discussion. May I perhaps invite Dr. Peter to provide a response to that, because he also picked up the role of, well, the planning system, or rather, the role of actually local residents in protecting the provision of housing.
Well, I mean, I can say from my practical experience, I can see it working in action in my own village, so I can see it around grassroots. Actually, I agree with an enormous amount of what Bob says. He's absolutely right to say, which by the way, got nothing to do with the title here, but he's absolutely right in saying that the consolidation of the house building fraternity down to about 10 major house builders has massively undermined the ability for us to meet housing targets. It's not been helped, of course, by the financial crash where we lost 250,000 qualified craftsmen and builders out of the system. The government, both the previous one and the current one, and I was involved with Infrastructure UK, which was part of the Treasury, in trying to, just after I became president of the Royal Trust Affairs, to get a worked up plan as to how to deal with this issue. And the way you undermine the situation he's described, which I entirely agree with, is actually not to worry about, of course, but also to take on construction through the social sector. And one of the mistakes that Osborne has made, and he's now admitted it, when we gave him advice some time ago that he could have issued a 20-year bond, 50 billion, 20-year bond at 2.5%. But I'm down a bit back about 2.5%. If you can't make more than 2.5% on social housing, you're taken out of shop. And he missed a trick, because if he had done that, absolutely, what he was worried about was us over-borrowing as a country and losing our AAA status as a borrower. And we said categorically that if you don't do what we're suggesting, you will lose the state, because there's a world of difference between going to a market and offering a ring-fenced bond to invest in something, than going to the market to raise money to pay salaries for somebody who's in the health and safety sector. It's a totally different concept. He admits he made a mistake. So we would put out, I advocated, the RICS has advocated, a very significant housing movement. We would want planning departments to double in size, and necessarily need to pay for it because they're completely overrun, understaffed, can't cope with what's going on. I would very strongly advise a change in the compulsory purchase system so we can get infrastructure, housing and such built, by which I mean that if you, at the smaller end, say if your house is worth £100,000, you get a 50% premium. If your house is worth £1 million, you get a 10% premium. You layer it. And by the way, if you object to the scheme, you don't get any additional compensation. We need some very radical decisions here. Bob and I can sit down and work that out and back the fact packet together and probably agree with 90% of each other. But it isn't the fact that we have such a problem in getting new houses built, and he's right, isn't just going to be, as a lot of other factors which I've listed, is a problem for all of us in terms of our ability to buy houses. But it's not, it's a factor, but it's not actually relevant to the motion in hand, which is real estate a driver for And both Colin and I put forward a whole stack of reasons as to why that is not the case.
Yeah, I just must make one comment to that. Sorry, Michelle. This notion that real estate is a vehicle, not a driver. I mean, who's driving the vehicle? A driverless vehicle. The people driving it is the real estate industry. The real estate industry is an incredibly well-organised, well-connected industry. It's extremely powerful. It includes the banks and the finance system, which property underpins the whole of that. So of course it's being driven by the very people that are actually benefiting from it, which is the real estate industry and all the finance sector people are connected into. Sorry for that.
Can I just follow that, because I think it is absolute nonsense. I mean, I just would like Rob to come and sit in my industry as president of the Royal Trust House and been a leader in the property industry for nearly 15 years, both as a practitioner and as a professional body representative. One of the problems we have in real estate is we do not have one voice.
Well, okay, if you'll come down to New Era Estate in Hackney, and you'll come down to Coin Street, and I'll show you what the alternative is. Yes, I'll attend one of your meetings.
It's not, you know, that is a sort of political, small issue. The issue here is, you know, communities have the ability to get together to work on what they want to do. And that is absolutely fantastic, and I'm 100% supportive of it. But to say that the power of the real estate industry is impacting the legislature is simple nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. We would love to try and do it. What we do is we have a whole stack of people like the RICS representing the professional world, British Property Federation, a number of federations. But after a long period of time, we managed to get Property Industry Alliance together to work on those things that we thought would benefit society and the country as a whole. And we don't always agree on it. So sometimes people are arguing their own case as a trade association, some as a professional body. It just isn't like that. And if you, let me just tell you this, because I've had to lobby politicians endlessly. But one thing I find quite staggering about the legislature in this country is they do not understand real estate. They just haven't got backgrounds in it or experience. A few have, but most of them haven't. They've got different political agenda. And to say that we're there and driving influence on it is just simple nonsense.
At this point, I would perhaps like to ask Colin about his experience with international institutional investors in real estate and how they perceive their role in, let's call it, shaping political agenda in terms of real estate, which is kind of the idea that we're moving towards here.
Well, I think one of the things I want to stress is there isn't a representative institutional investor or international investor. They're all different, and they have very different outlooks and perspectives. So what Norges is doing and what GIC is doing is very different to what Cox is doing. I don't think it's right to lump them all into one area. But one thing that's interesting in the light of economizing the property industry is that you kindly mentioned the body from the Forum Industry Agenda Council, Real Estate Organisation. This is a lobby body. It's the World Economic Forum. It's actually party of the US kind of political position rather than deeply capitalist, not quite alien lizards controlling the world. What did that industry council decide was its most pressing priority? It was to talk about the contribution of the real estate industry to sustainability and resilience in urbanisation. And it was concerned about its ability to help not just in developed economies and cities, but also in emerging economies as well. Now, we can have an argument about how particular shape is in the way that it wants to shape it, but nonetheless, that's the interest that's coming from at the Agenda Council. So in terms of influencing, yes, it is talking about regulation. A lot of the discussions about regulation, but we need better macro-prudential regulation. We need central banks, we need coordination of central banks to prevent the excessive flows of capital, particularly debt capital, market, which causes the destabilisation of market prices. Look at real estate returns. Now I'm back to commercial real estate organisations. We've got real estate returns. The income side, that's really stable. All the volatility in real estate returns is capital market volatility. That capital market volatility is driven by what's happening in the financial markets and capital markets. So, why have we got big jumps in commercial real estate returns? Because of very low interest rates. Has the real estate industry caused those very low interest rates? I don't think so. Has central bank policy and government-backed economic policy and quantitative easing caused those low interest rates? Yes, I think that's probably the case. So it's actually more about how can we create a stable macroprudential environment with tripwires that stop excessive leverage, stop excessive flows of capital, so that the professional industry can use it.
Great, thank you very much. At this point, we have heard about how the institutional investors in real estate can shape investments from a commercial side. But of course, Michelle has pointed out a lot of interesting facts about inequality in housing markets and how that differs across regions and also across generations. So what do you feel could be the role of the industry in addressing these inequalities?
Yeah, sure. Because it's a point well taken, and it's not just residential real estate, it's a lot going on in commercial markets as well. So,
My question is seeing that the institutional investors are mainly active on the commercial side, as you pointed out, and they are very much aware of the issues surrounding real estate and the impact on society and the environment, etc. What do you feel is the role of the industry in addressing the inequalities in the housing market that you mentioned?
well, some of the things mentioned before about maybe having some sort of housing law, really not a potential solution, it's a terrific idea. And certainly for government to play a more innovative role in financing some of these, innovative financing instruments for some of these things. And I think that's a very good point, that the politicians' reluctance to spend on infrastructure investment generally, let alone housing specifically, they're lumping investment and consumption all together, those sorts of spending all together, and actually a more innovative, nuanced approach to using public sector finances to, maybe in public-private partnerships of some form, to enable these housing projects to be financed. But also, I think regulation has a role to play. I think another point to note about that, the motion that we're debating, it does say a driver, not the only driver. So I don't think it's saying that it's the only thing that's going on. I would say it's a very, very complex range of issues. Part of the problem is that politicians can be quite short-termist, they're preoccupied with winning an election generally, and so encouraging politicians and policymakers to take a more long-term view would be a very important solution. But certainly some of these innovative financing solutions would be important.
Thanks very much. At this point, I'd like to give the audience the opportunity to raise any questions or maybe comment on any of the questions that were put forward.
I'm Alexandra, second year of economist. I would like to refer partly to what Professor Vizier mentioned. There is much being said about the real estate bubble being built right now, but also a lot about the so-called real tech bubble. So I was wondering what our speakers, especially those who agree that real estate is a driver in market volatility, think about the potential influence of the best of this real tech bubble on the property market and this market volatility.
Sorry, can you just repeat that question? Are you saying what you think we could get from the best of the new tech?
No, I'm saying that if we assume that there is this new tech bubble, and if we think, what may be the potential influence on real estate as a driver in market volatility? How it may be related?
if they all spend their money on when they IPOs, if they all spend their money on housing. That would contribute to it. Certainly when the previous dot-com bubble, low that Cambridge entrepreneurs did very well, and they hyped up the Cambridge property market, so what they did.
Well, if you think about what's the real estate industry response to increasing demand is create space for that demand. So think about Silicon Roundabouts in London. You've got a real estate response to demand. Obviously, if that demand evaporates, then you've got a lot of real estate there, which doesn't have high-tech companies with people with beards and moustaches drinking air-pressed coffee all the time. But on the other hand, the real estate's still there, and it can be used for the next in a different way. And that's the nice thing about real estate. It's a place where things can happen. And if one demand goes away, then you can use it for something else.
By the way, there's a subplot to that. By the way, lots of blue chip people don't have beards and moustaches, they're female. And they're a big driver of what's going on. There is an issue here which is very important, which Colin has touched on, and that is the use of technology in buildings. So this forward thinking is going on, and the younger generation largely driving it, which is fantastic. Isn't falling on deaf ears for a lot of the older generation like myself, who like to think have an open mind on this. The technology is fundamentally changing. One of the problems we have in real estate, which is another debate, is it's 70% allegedly of carbon in the air is through real estate. And making buildings with concrete and steel is very carbon intensive. Technologies to reduce that in terms of building costs, so the buildings are made in an industrial manner, using more environmentally friendly techniques, regenerating buildings, using better air conditioning, or green air conditioning, so you don't have to knock the building down and start again, because a lot of the energy is in the foundations and the frame of the building. These are the things that are really exciting for us in the real estate industry. And just to try and de-demonize it, there are whole sections of industry that are devoted to greening the environment. It's the top agenda in the boardrooms that I come from, and the world that I work in, is how to deal with ridiculousness of EPCs, which are bad and drugs. There's another story. The drive towards reducing energy consumption in our buildings is very important, because that's a lot of tenants are now asking how green these buildings are, and they won't occupy buildings unless they have certain types of green characteristics. So it's a totally exciting evolution of thinking. And when I started in this industry, we were a little bubble on our own, a little isolated as our own. Now, the people in the industry come from all walks of life. It's a massive change there, which is really exciting.
A follow-on point on that, in fact, we've just I've just written a report on something called Building Information Modelling, kindly sponsored by the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. And in the construction,
it's the future.
Yes, and loads of work going on building information modelling, which is a way to smooth out information flows, also potentially embedding collaborative working practices in construction, which could be applied to housing as well. A load of the construction businesses, for example, in London, are very interested in this building information modelling, and the potential for building information modelling to really lower the costs of construction, including for the housing sector, is enormous. And so everyone who's interested, I don't know the extent to which you touch on that in your courses, but those innovations in that space. But one of the problems with it is the building information modelling industry is currently dominated by one supplier, which is called Autodesk. And so there's a lot of policy work to be done there to ensure that the benefits of these technological innovations are spread evenly, particularly for the small and medium-sized enterprises, which are very largely represented in the construction industry.
Do we have any other questions? Don't be shy. Anybody? Yeah.
I've got a few, but
I just have a quick question about like sustainability issues. That's like just where I was living at the moment. I'm just wondering how is kind of sustainability looked at in the real estate industry? How much emphasis is there on kind of economic values versus like social values? That's to anyone who feels like answering.
I can certainly give a point of view on that. I've just completed a research project funded by the ESRC, which involved talking to house builders and planners and developers in the North Hampshire, Milton Keynes area. And it was about sustainable housing. And the general answer we got from the house builders was that sustainability is simply cost, which comes with land value. They don't really expect to have to pay for it. If local authorities absolutely insist they're prepared to contribute something towards it. But they're very resistant to it indeed, because they just regard it as a cost. They don't regard it as something that adds to the value of their property. They regard it as a niche market that their customers don't particularly want, or not many do. And so they see it as a cost, and therefore the cost goes back onto the public purse. And there is a crisis about funding sustainable housing and sustainable development that surrounds housing, because the house builders simply won't fund it.
Again, switching from resi to commercial, what's evident from the research and recently on the industry is that there is a value to sustainable housing. There's a measurable value, and that value therefore influences developers because they're thinking about what will the investors want to buy. It influences investors because tenants will pay higher rents for more sustainable buildings. And there is recognition of this in many of the industry bodies, the Board of Council, for example. But to come back to, I think, part of the thrust of your question, pretty much the property industry where it's talking about sustainable issues has been talking about one, building level, and two, it's been talking about environment. It's actually largely talking about CO2 and energy consumption. It's not really been talking about circular economy issues. It's not been talking about the wider sustainability and the contribution of real estate development to the sustainability of the city or the region and its integration with the infrastructure. And I think that's where there's got to be a major growth. But many parts of the industry are well aware of that, and significant members of the industry are building that into their foregoing strategy. It's a capitalist decision. It's not some Damascus conversion to a socialist vision. It's about protecting your portfolio, the risks and protecting your cash flow. But nonetheless, it's real.
I mean, there are other issues that you raise here. One of the problems we have is clearly the reduction of energy consumption is a very important objective. But the other side of the coin is the production of energy which is produced in a green manner. And I happen to think we spend far too much time and energy looking at the end user rather than the supplier and getting coherent energy policy. I mean, this country is in close to disastrous economic position through brownouts and lack of electricity, policy. But that's another day. I would say that the answer, again, Bob puts his finger on it, and I've absolutely no doubt, I did the same service somewhere else, the answers would be the same. And the reason it's different in the commercial world from the residential world is because you guys aren't, and your parents or your peer group above you that are thinking about houses are, on the whole, not seeking to engage with it. There are exceptions, but that's whereas commercial people, the corporate social responsibility agenda, to attract employment, particularly young people who are very keen on these things, and rightly so, need to create an environment where they can encourage new people to come and people to stay. It's very expensive to place people there. So people want to work in where they feel comfortable. And so the occupier, the companies, private individuals, commercial world, are driving the developers. And actually now, it's got to such a point where most developers will want a badge of honour to have a green rated building, etc. It's culturally almost, not quite overripe, but getting close to it, actually, getting very close to it. I've got some questions that you may ask.
I actually have a question for you as well. So we spoke quite in detail about how real estate may or may not be a driver of in, let's say, the UK or the US. But what do you think is or should be the role of real estate in economic development in, let's say, third world countries in Africa? And adding on to that, kind of.
Can I just say, I can give you an example, but it's going to be in domestic terms, if I may say so. My firm provides English partnerships on the recovery of the Durham mining villages. We're destitute, well not destitute, but they're a real high unemployment after all the mines are closed. Newcastle is half an hour's bus ride away. Desperate shortage of plasterers, chippies, etc. Being flown in from Poland on Monday morning, Sunday night, flown back. And English Partnership wanted my firm to advise on a physical regeneration to make people feel proud of their issues. And I was at a meeting where we were presenting this, and I stopped them and said, as a client, CEO of the individual, but I said, as a client, we're asking us to do more work. Because actually, if people don't have pride in the fact that they've got work, can get work, and can pay their way with that work, just improving the fabric of the schools are going to be the answer. And we need to spend a lot of money on training and equipping people to get into the workspace and providing the ability to get into that workspace. That wealth and pride then immediately feeds back into a need to upgrade the environment, and then it becomes a positive circle. But if you upgrade the environment in an area which is destitute, where nobody's work, nobody has any pride in themselves, it very quickly gets destroyed and vandalized. You've got to tackle it from the human end, not the physical end, in my view. And that, by the way, is my answer to your question in terms of what's happening in the third world.
The problem of wealth inequality is far more profound in developing countries, and the big illustration of it is Mumbai, some of the most expensive property in the world, and some of the Mumbai slums. And so I think it's a very big problem, particularly the complexity of the sort of social, cultural, religious structures in some of those countries. I think it's going to be a very difficult problem to resolve. But I would think it was quite a big worry, yes. Far more evidence of perhaps path dependency and people getting stuck in poverty traps in developing economies, for example, because the public infrastructure to support accumulation of human capital via education or a good healthcare system is just not so well thought out. And so access to good healthcare is a privilege, perhaps. So a lot of work needs to be put into that for sure.
Can I just make a comment? It's a really interesting point, actually. What I know about it, which is not a great deal, is that there is a real estate industry in this country. It's particularly fragmented, particular kind. Some of it's kind of grassroots, self-built. Some of it is speculation of most horrendous kind. And from what I know about it, what progressives in some of those countries want actually is a planning system. They want a building regulation system. They want a planning system that's sensible. They want a non-corrupt, democratic planning system as a first stop, in order to get some kind of rationality into the way in which cities are developing. And that's very, very difficult to achieve, but I think that is the goal of some of the progressive forces and some of the decisions. And I'm not saying we've got a perfect planning system by any means, but we've a lot further down the road than these other countries.
I think I'd add to that, land rights, land legislation is actually
critical to the preservation of equality is inequality in the ownership of land. I remember we talked about land. Land was here, I think, in the room when we were talking about it. Just as a further addition to that is as economies emerge and started growing very rapidly, real estate alongside infrastructure has a really critical role to play in those sustainability issues that we were talking about before. And what you see in some of the very rapidly growing emerging cities is a complete planning and infrastructure disaster. And it's a real shame because there was a real opportunity there to say, well, now we can develop these cities in a wholesome way.
I mean, that of course is a sort of political system. If you take India, for instance, where I spent all the time, it was always a standing joke that they were reconsidering whether they should expand Mumbai Airport, international airport, or recite it. Where the story here. And the Minister of Aviation got involved in this process, and it was leaked that in fact it had been shifted to the south side of the river. All the developers started optioning the land. Who owned the land? The Minister of Aviation. When he managed to sell on all this stuff to his unsuspecting people, he made the decision to expand Mumbai Airport. I mean, how do you deal with that? It is absolutely true that land and property in these countries is manipulated in a way in which the West developed our society. If you go back to our medieval period, land was a terrible issue because we had feudal structure and the king could just grant land and wealth for those people who supported them in battle, etc. And that was definitely a driver, but this is not where we're at now. Not in the possible.
Before we'd like to invite you guys for a drink downstairs, is there one final closing question from the audience?
Well, it's a really a question for me because I'm a zoning analyst here, I'm not building here. But if you think about real estate as something that's easy to tax, it's also easy to really change because there really was an issue about that. And at the same time, you see that, people here cannot vote for a redistribution of real estate wealth. So my question is whether these people are taking their own decisions or whether it's a really problem.
Sorry. What's the question?
Well, the question is whether the British should vote for more land taxes, corporate taxes, or should they not do that because they're following?
Well, yes, I mean, it is an interesting political dilemma. Is that sort of, at a kind of rational level, a lot of people in surveys do say that there needs to be fair taxation rather than increases in land values to replace, for example, council tax system or the land value tax system. But when it comes to politicians actually grasping it and doing something about it, they run away from it. And so there is a great fear in introducing legislation around land. Already, Labour wants to have this mansion tax, and it's not perfect. It creates a huge kind of uproar. The idea that you should be in any way affecting the value of people's property. It sort of terrifies people. In the Daily Mail, will hunt people down who make the suggestion that such a thing should happen. So I think there was a lot of public assent to something being done, but to actually make much progress on it is quite difficult. And I think many of us, like myself, who would have thought that the property crash we recently had and previously, property crashes would have led to a kind of review of the way in which land and property were regulated in this country. We've been disappointed, despite best efforts to lobby political parties to do something. So it is one of the great British dilemmas of conservatism that we have towards property, which is not to be seen, for example, in Scotland. There's a much more radical view
of land taken because of their history in relation to land reform. It's important.
Make some other comments on that, if I may. First of all, I think tax should generally be related to ability to pay. And just because somebody happens to live in £1 million house, which they bought for £200,000, but they don't have the income to pay, it's not a very fair going round. There's a much easier way of raising tax, which should be done. For reasons which I do not understand, both this government and the previous government have simply not got down the list of redoing the business rates, valuations, which are way out of date, and also introducing additional levels of council tax, which is a much easier way to deal with things. I do think that Bob here is looking at the wrong end of the telescope. I would say that, but I think regulating land and the issues we've been talking about, as though it's the criminal. It's the issue of how finance is used and driving the lack of regulation at the financial level that adversely impacts on real estate and creates these cycles. That's where we need to put our attention more than anything else, the root cause of the problem. There are things that we can do which, as I keep on saying, I think Gordon, Michelle and Colin and I can sit down and come up with a plan of action which probably 90% of us agree with each other on. I hope you got that message, by the way, in the housing market. But that isn't what's really addressing this motion, which is what I need to really concentrate on. And we're going to ask you at the end of this whether you changed your mind on this. But before I do, if I can have the privilege of asking one question of the economists here. Hands up people in this room who believe in the chaos theory. As a people who know what chaos theory is. Are there any economists in the room here? Right, one. The rest of them don't believe that. Chaos theory is an interesting idea which is best explained by a butterfly flaps its wings in Thailand, causes slightly updraft, affects the near air molecules beside it, and leads to eventually a thunderstorm which changes the Earth's pattern at that particular moment, which causes a flood of some pressure. Now, the chaos theory in relation to the current financial crisis is that NASA employed some of the best physicists and mathematicians in the world in order to get to the moon and to do other things. And then there was a lull, and they made all people redundant. I think they made about 2,000 top physicists, best physicists and mathematicians in the world. Where did they go? Where did the hedge funds? And it's not an exaggeration. And what they did was produce the most amazing algorithms in order to make how markets work. And they got it wrong. Because none of them, they were all working on rationality, capital pricing models, efficient frontiers, all stuff that I was taught and such before. And when I was at Cambridge and did economics for a year in England, the word behavioural economics never actually appeared. Now you're a behavioural economic economist. And I actually think that if that's your direction of travel, Michelle, I want you to sing out the economists, if you may, or just do a promotion of why I support you, why you think behavioural economics, which is off pitch, but we think that I really want to.
Because I'm an economist first and foremost. I have a psychology degree as well, but I did my PhD in economics in Cambridge. And I think economics, it gets a bad press because it's a lot of analytical power, but it lacks intuitive plausibility. And I think the great thing about behavioural economics is it's sometimes misrepresented as being about people being stupid and irrational. And that's not my view of behavioural economics at all. It's about people being boundedly rational. And so if you put together, the analytical strength of an economic model with a more intuitive description of how real people behave in a boundedly rational way, given information constraints, but also given constraints on computational complexity, all those sorts of things, I think you've got a really, really powerful way to understand economic financial behaviour. And the interest out there is enormous. In the city all the time, I'm talking to people interested in behavioural finance, all the policy policymakers are really intervening economics and sort of large policy sort of stuff. So there's enormous interest there and a very wide range of applications. So it's a great subject.
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shall we now give the floor to an opportunity for, let's say, a very brief closing statement? Let's say 30 seconds to a minute or so. Just so, in preparation for the whole, which of course come up in a second, people can then form their opinion on the real estate scale. Who would like to start?
1 minute. I think what's being suggested by the opponents of this motion is that we are demonising real estate. And actually there are good reasons for considering it as a demon. The European countries that I've been to and studied, they don't have this adversarial relationship between landowners, property developers and the people and the government. They work together, actually function most of the time. But here we have this extraordinary, polarised, adversarial system, which is evident in this motion and the very fact that we're discussing it. And I think there are real issues here about the intractable nature of the property industry and its very unreconstructed, very unmodern approach to development. And I think this is the reason why the community gets involved in such a conflict with the development industry, is because the development industry itself needs badly to reform its whole approach.
I think the evidence undoubtedly shows, in my view, that in terms of inequality of opportunity, lack of access to the housing sector, and certainly demographic groups and regional divide as well, is a key problem. But I don't blame the real estate market players themselves. I think it's a problem of government. And so to follow up on your point, if we regard this as a problem, then we need policymakers to confront it in a more effective and sensible way.
I actually believe that we have to look at this motion and stand back from the small stuff and the big stuff. As I've said, the drivers for the inequalities that we are having worldwide are to do with macroeconomic and geopolitical events and nothing to do with property at all. That's to do with globalization, technology, innovations, which has led to, in the West, where we come from, a damping down people's ability to earn living wages. And that has sparked the difference. The trouble with it is that capital created out of the wealth that's been created with the 1,826 billionaires and all the other people, only 10% of whom are real estate oriented. The wealth that they've been created, and the wealth created by the sovereign funds and others have, when Norway decides to put 10% of its budget into real estate, that's a $48 billion of new money coming into real estate, which underpins its store of wealth. Colin has said what the advantages are. And yes, without any question, it's a store of wealth, it's a vehicle. But it is not, repeat, not the driver. It's the policies around it, the issues of supply and demand, which are generated by politicians, not real estate industry, which are factors in driving the situation that we have here, and it's not real estate itself.
I think I've really got a great deal to add to that, other than to say that real estate is a factor of production, real estate is shelter. As an investment, real estate is a dampener of volatility, it diversifies away risk. So just in those terms, the motion is good. And the inequality comes from the organisations of society, not from the real estate within that society. And the volatility comes as much as anything from weak macro-prudential regulation and what happens in capital and financial markets. So we should reject this motion.